Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Modern Mothers Queer Parenting in China podcast. I'm your host, Mikita, and in this episode, we'll be exploring something that's reshaping family life for queer women across Chinese societies assisted reproductive technologies, or ART for short. Today, we have invited incredible guests who will be sharing real experiences, expert insights, and stories that highlight both the challenges and the resilience of queer families. To start us off, we're so lucky to have Miss Liu Ajo, of a mother who pursued shared motherhood with her wife and invested her heart and, yes, a lot of money into bringing their child into the world. Thank you for being here.
Hi everyone, I'm Leo Ho, a 31-year-old mother who has spent $100,000 to have a baby that belonged to me and my wife. Thank you for having me. I am very happy to be seated here today with other women who are knowledgeable and passionate about the topic of shared motherhood, as it was definitely one of the most difficult yet rewarding decisions I had to make in my life.
Thank you so much, Miss Jo. And joining us as well is our socio-cultural expert, Professor Corinne, whose work on gender, sexuality, and kinship in China provides so much context for conversations such as this.
Hi everyone, my name is Corinne. I'm a sociologist specializing in gender, sexuality, and family studies in contemporary Chinese society. Over the past decade, my research has focused on how cultural norms like filial piety and heteronormativity intersect with modern technologies such as ART. I've conducted ethnography studies on online lesbian parenting communities and explored how queer families negotiate legitimacy and belonging in a rapidly changing social landscape. I'm excited to share insights on how these dynamics shape not only family formation, but also broader ideas of kinship and identity.
And rounding out today's panel is our legal expert, Irene, who has worked directly with LGBTQ families navigating these complicated and often unfair legal landscapes.
Hey everyone, my name is Irene. I'm a lawyer, and for the last few years, I've been immersed in LGBTQ family law here in China. I've first time seeing how the system can make that incredibly difficult. My work is all about untangling these complex laws and fighting for these parents because everyone deserves to have their family protected.
Now, for listeners who may be new to this topic, ART includes treatments like IVF and IUI. But in our episode today, we'll be focusing on A Long Bi Huai, which is shared motherhood in English, where one mother provides the egg and the other carries the pregnancy. Now, ART, whether IVF, IUI, or shared motherhood, it isn't just a medical option. It's a transformative route that allows lesbian couples to form families that break away from traditional norms. And that's powerful. Unlike heterosexual couples who often turn to ART due to medical infertility, lesbian couples face what we might call structural infertility. It's not their bodies preventing them from forming these families, it's policy, access, recognition. And that difference reveals so much about how society decides who is allowed to become a parent. Today, we'll be asking, how do lesbian couples navigate these emotional, financial, and legal complexities? And how is ART redefining what family can look like in China? Miss Jo, I just want to thank you for being so open. I want to take us back to the beginning of our journey. What sparked your decision to pursue motherhood? And if you don't mind me asking, why was it so important for you to select a specific sperm donor?
So I don't mind this question at all. After many rounds of interviews with potential sperm donors, we picked a domestic, kind-hearted university student. So most importantly, he was someone who knew nothing about us, so in the future he won't disturb our lives. So we can take care of the baby and give him a good environment, so that I believe that even without the role of a father, our family of three could still most definitely be able to enjoy a very happy life together.
That must have been a very big change.
Yes, yes. It was absolutely a very big change for both me and my wife, but we ultimately decided that this was what we wanted.
That must have been a big emotional step. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's incredibly powerful to hear the intentionality behind building your family. So we've talked about pursuing ART and how it's a major decision emotionally, but of course, the financial side plays a huge role as well. I'd love to zoom in on that. Many people have heard stories about couples traveling abroad for fertility treatment. Miss Jo, did you ever consider going outside of China for ART, and how common is that among other queer mothers?
Hmm. Personally, I don't think it's completely necessary to go abroad for ART. So, in fact, I think doing ART domestically here in mainland China is actually a better choice. A foreign language may lead to miscommunication and it's too far away. And relatively speaking, the expenses are much higher as well.
I think many listeners might picture overseas ART as being some kind of straightforward upgrade, but what you're describing is actually the reality for so many queer families. Travel, language differences, cost, these aren't small barriers.
Yes, exactly. Going abroad for reproductive tourism is comparatively more expensive, which would limit access to a lot of mothers. In such cases, I would also like to bring up the way same-sex couples with more economic and social capital can pursue reproductive tourism and seek ART services abroad.
Yep. Considering the ability for treatment and the resources needed to navigate legal and social obstacles, ART is expensive and often not covered by insurance, which makes it more accessible to middle and upper class couples.
So that actually brings us to a really important topic about intersectionality. So we've talked about the financial weight of ART, but how does sexuality and class intersect to shape the experience of lesbian couples in Chinese societies? And for listeners who may not be familiar with terms like intersectionality or reproductive tourism, could you please unpack what this looks like in practice?
Intersectionality here means that being a sexual minority and belonging to a certain class creates layered challenges. For instance, ART is technically available in China, but only for married heterosexual couples. Lesbian couples often rely on private clinics or overseas services, which are costly and legally risky. This stratifies reproduction. Those with higher economic capital can navigate these barriers more easily.
Exactly. The law doesn't recognize same-sex marriage, so ART access is unofficial for lesbians. Wealthier couples can afford reproductive tourism by going to Thailand or the US, while others resort to underground clinics. This creates what we call a hierarchy of reproductive privilege.
I agree. My wife and I chose domestic ART because overseas options were simply too expensive and far away. But even here, the process was costly, around 100K RMB. For many couples, that's simply not possible.
Right. And beyond cost, class intersects with cultural capital. Couples with higher education and global exposure often feel more empowered to challenge norms and seek ART abroad. Meanwhile, working class couples may face stronger family pressure to conform to heteronormative expectations, making ART less accessible socially, not just financially.
I love that term, hierarchy of reproductive privilege. It really captures what so many queer families feel, but rarely get the language for. And I want to emphasize this for our listeners. When a system limits who can build a family safely and legally, that burden shouldn't fall on the individuals alone. That's structural inequity, and naming it is the first step towards changing it. Now that we've talked about access and barriers, I'd love to highlight how ART is reshaping what family itself looks like. So, for Miss Jo and our two experts, how does ART change family building for lesbian couples? And how does it interact with expectations from families and society?
Through a sociocultural lens, I would argue that ART provides agency and connection for queer mothers in Chinese society. According to an ethnography study in the Midwifery Journal, lesbian couples report that A was seen as the best way to establish a family because it gives a sense of symbolic connectedness with the child for both.
I would definitely have to agree. I show strong opposition to heterosexual family traditions, but regardless, I find that having children still plays a crucial role in maintaining family harmony. By each of us contributing biologically, my partner through genetics and myself through pregnancy, we both feel that we are mothers.
I can absolutely see how this shared model creates a more united and intentional family structure. It's such a powerful way to claim equal motherhood, both emotionally and biologically.
However, I would also like to bring up one more point. ART also interacts with filial piety. Some middle class lesbian couples pursue ART partly to gain acceptance from their natal families. Having a child can legitimize their relationship in the eyes of parents, which shows how cultural norms and class aspirations intertwine.
Interesting. Why would that be the case?
To answer that, we need to look at how lesbian couples in Chinese societies navigate deep rooted cultural values, especially the concept of filial piety. In my research, many lesbian couples use ART not only to form families, but to fulfill cultural expectations, using childbearing as a way to gain legitimacy and acceptance within their natal families.
That's fascinating. And just to clarify for our listeners who might not be familiar, filial piety is actually a huge force in Chinese cultural expectations. So using ART to gain acceptance within one's family actually makes a lot of sense.
Some same-sex families tend to experience emotional entanglements with their families of origin, who often still endorse heteronormative family beliefs. The result of this study indicated that having children through assisted reproduction may help the nuclear families of lesbian couples to unite and enhance the relationships of the extended families in a broader sense.
That's such a meaningful insight, and hearing how cultural expectations interact with personal desires really highlights how complex and how brave those decisions actually are. So now I want to explore how these cultural ideas collide with legal and financial barriers. Irene, can you walk us through what happens legally once a queer couple successfully has a child through ART and vulnerabilities remain?
Yes, and even when ART succeeds, legal recognition remains unequal. If a couple splits, the genetic mother often loses custody because courts prioritize the birth mother. This legal vulnerability disproportionately affect those without resources to fight lengthy court battles. And I would also like to touch on the fact that Chinese law does not recognize shared motherhood for children through ART. The landmark Xiamen case established that the mom who gave birth is the legal mother. The court rejected that the genetic mother's claim for custody, ruling that her request to confirm a parent-child relationship was unreasonable and without legal basis.
Wow, although I'm currently in a very happy relationship with my partner, that is a challenge I can see many lesbian couples facing. Certainly, although the process of obtaining my baby's birth certificate and listing him under our household registration was relatively simple, my partner and I were only able to do so by registering it under a single parent household. During this process, we simply left the father's name blank and wrote the birth mother of our child, that being me, as the mother on the document.
Yes, the difficulty comes in proving motherhood. For the genetic mother, the legal barriers are insurmountable. In a Xiaohongshu post, lawyer in Shanghai, it states that if the couple separates, the birth certificate by default bears the birth mother's name.
I've noticed that in the past, in some news, that the genetic mother, partner A, may bribe the officials and put her name on the birth certificate, but now it is not viable due to facial recognition system.
Yes, and even a private DNA test may be dismissed by the court, which prioritize official documentation. The court may refuse to approve a legally binding DNA test.
The concept of two mothers is underrepresented. It ignores the very family connection unit that we build by making one parent a legal stranger to her own child from the very beginning.
These stories reveal just how deeply love, technology, and law intersects. And to bring this full circle, I've invited messages from listeners whose experiences shed even more light on how lesbian couples in China are reshaping family formation through ART.
Hello, hosts and guests of the Modern Mothers podcast. I've been a long-time listener of yours, and my name is Didi, a 42-year-old woman who lives in Shanghai. Just last month, for the first time in 4 years, I was finally able to see my daughter since separating with my ex-wife. It was heartbreaking not being able to see my children. In 2017, I gave birth to a girl, and my ex-wife bore a boy. Both kids are genetically tied to my ex-wife through IVF treatment as we used the embryos of my ex-wife and sperm from a donor. We were creating new life. I didn't imagine that one day we would break up. After our 2019 split, I was separated from my children, and it was only recently that I was given the right to pay monthly visits to my daughter, as she's a child I gave birth to. However, it also feels extremely bittersweet as I haven't been given the legal permission to visit my son. Despite this, I hope that I've been able to set the precedent for the reality that two mothers are able to share parental custody. Thank you to the host Makuta and respected guests for listening to my story.
Didi, thank you so much for sharing. Your story is heartbreaking, courageous, and incredibly important. You've lived the legal gaps that we've been discussing in this very episode, and your willingness to speak about them pushes the conversation forward. And to everyone listening, this is why recognition matters. This is why family needs legal protection.
I remember hearing your story on the news. It really marks the first time that a Chinese court recognized that a child can have two legal mothers. My heart really goes out to you because although you were able to have this victory, there are still many challenges and hurdles.
Didi, those years apart must have been incredibly hard, and I can imagine how overwhelming it feels to finally see your daughter again. What really stands out to me is how your experience reflects both the challenges and the progress happening in Chinese society. For a very long time, family was defined very narrowly: one mother, one father. But today we're seeing a shift. More people, especially the younger generations, are becoming open minded and supportive of diverse family structures.
Didi, what you've done here is truly monumental. The fact that the court looked at your case and said, yes, this child can have two legal mothers is a first. You have provided reference for moms of the next generation. The future is about building on what you've started. We needed to keep pushing for laws that see the whole family so that love is recognized, not just biology.
Hi, I'm Yumi. My partner and I had our trial through ART. I often hear people say that having two mothers is somehow unfair to the child. And honestly, I don't understand where that idea comes from. To me, what matters most is whether a child feels loved, cared for, and grows up happy and healthy. Whether the parents are lesbian or not shouldn't make a difference. Sexuality isn't what defines good parenting. Both of us love our child deeply. She's the center of our lives. We are committed to giving her everything she needs and raising her with all the love we have. I truly believe the love she receives is no less than what any child in a traditional family would get.
Thank you so much for your message, Yumi. There's this misconception that traditional family structures are what determines a child's well-being. What matters most is love, stability, and care. Your story is a powerful reminder that families come in many forms and all deserve respect.
I couldn't agree more. As a mother myself, I know how much energy and heart goes into raising a child. Father figure is essential, but what truly matters is whether the child feels loved and supported.
The idea that a child needs a traditional family often comes from old assumptions about gender roles that mothers nurture and fathers provide. In fact, studies on same sex parenting globally have found no difference in children's emotional or social development compared to those raised in heterosexual families. What's fascinating is that in China, we are starting to see a quiet cultural shift. More people are questioning these rigid roles and recognizing that parenting is about emotional labor and commitment, not gender.
Yumi, your point is so valid. Legally, the system still assumes a one mother and one father model, which reinforces the stereotypes. Visibility of families like yours is pushing the conversation forward.
Today's conversation makes one thing crystal clear. ART isn't just a medical tool. It's a pathway for queer women to build meaningful, intentional families in a society that hasn't fully caught up yet. Shared motherhood gives both parents a connection. New legal cases show emerging recognition. But it is clear that the law still lags behind the lived reality. I want to thank the families who stepped forward, like Miss Jo, Didi, and Yumi, who are the reason change becomes possible. So our argument is simple. ART has the power to broaden our understanding of family, but until legal systems and social structures evolve, queer mothers will continue facing barriers that they shouldn't have to navigate alone. Their stories showed courage, innovation, and love. Thank you to all our guests and listeners. The conversation will continue, and so will the push for equality.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
you.